Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah, and today we're going to talk about Educate, an NGO. And first of all, I want to thank OT301 to be able to host this and for us to talk about our cause and about our philosophy. I am Sarah. I am working for Educate myself in the events team, and today I'm going to talk with the founder of Educate, Antonia. Welcome.
Hey Sarah, nice to be here.
Talk a little bit about you.
My name is Antonia. I'm one of the founders of Educate. I lived in Honduras for a couple years back in 2014-15. Now we're working in education in Honduras, so in Central America, with a team both here in Amsterdam and a team in Honduras. So really excited to be here and share a little bit about our work and what we're doing.
Yes, great. So in the run of this whole show, we're going to deep dive into the philosophy, into the projects of Educate.
Yep.
But of course, we have, as you said, we have a team here in Amsterdam. We have some volunteers who are working in our teams. Let's hear about their motivation and why they joined Educate at some point.
I've decided to volunteer at Educate because I think that education is one of the most important things that you can give a child. Education is the key to freedom, the key to be whoever you want to be, to do whatever you want to do. And I think it's even more meaningful for little girls who can choose to be just fully independent, to choose the path they've decided to choose, and to be free in life. So that's why I volunteered with Educate in the communications team to help children in Honduras achieve their dreams, achieve their ambitions, and be informed citizens and be just happy with their life.
Hi, I'm Micah, and I'm a grants writer for Educate. And the reason that I volunteer for Educate is that it's a great organization which really puts communities at the center of its work and ensures that projects are self-sustaining and locally led. And as a kid, I always loved going to the library and picking out books and rereading them a million times before returning them. And I hope that the work that Educate does allows for children and youth in Honduras to have the same experience.
Hello, I volunteer for Educate because it gives me the opportunity to give back in the educational field in my home country of Honduras. Educate is amazing because it's a full volunteer grassroots organization that really works within the community.
Hi, my name is Mona and I volunteer at Educate as part of the creative content and PR team because unfortunately, as many of you already know, a lot of children in Honduras cannot afford or continue their education, which is very sad, of course. The work that Educate provides, however, makes this opportunity to learn more achievable. It does not only give hope, it also gives a chance to children whose dream is simply to learn.
Hi, my name is Claudia. I volunteer with Educate because I really believe in the team's grassroots mission of working with people on the ground in Honduras to improve children's lives by increasing their access to reading. Reading is a really great way to open up horizons and to help children learn. And Educate is really a leader in this space, so definitely donate.
So just now we listened to some of the volunteers here from the team in Amsterdam. And how many team members do we have here in Amsterdam?
I think we're around 25 here in Amsterdam now, and then another 10 in Honduras. So obviously we have all the people here doing the fundraising and events, but we also have the project leaders and the coordinators on the ground. Yeah. So we're, I think, around 40 people now altogether in the team, which is crazy.
And you started with how many?
With two.
Yeah.
We founded Educate back in 2017, so just two of us, and it's amazing to see how it's grown.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's great. Let's talk about like the founding and everything and your journey a bit later on. Mm-hmm. So before we go more into like also like the whole Honduran or like the Honduran country information and like the projects and so on, let's get into the vibe a little bit more. So I know that we have some music.
Yeah.
Could you introduce our new song? Or like
we have a classic from Honduras by Polache, who's a musician and a football player, interestingly. He writes a lot about daily life in Honduras, love, peace, war, football, corruption, and highlights a lot of Honduran culture in his songs. So we're going to kick off with a song from Polache.
Que no te tapen los ojos, la deforestación y contaminación, la pobreza, injusticia y bajeza, que con frecuencia amigo uno se encuentra en esta nación. Ponele mucha atención a esta canción de corazón, es más la riqueza, grandeza, nobleza y más la belleza que hay en esta tierra, que es una bendición. Mira Honduras con otros ojos, y esta es tu tierra, descubrí que admirarla con otros ojos vas a merecerla. Mira Honduras con otros ojos, tienes que quererla, descubrí que admirarla con otros ojos vas a merecerla. Mira Honduras con otros ojos, y esta es tu tierra, descubrí que admirarla con otros ojos vas a merecerla. Mira Honduras con otros ojos, tienes que quererla, descubrí que admirarla con otros ojos vas a merecerla. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la.
Beautiful. So let's start at the start. So we heard our volunteers talking, and we had a little conversation in the beginning. But what is Educate doing?
Yeah, so we have two sort of core areas of our work in Honduras. One is the scholarship program where we partner with local public high schools, and we work with teachers to find and select really passionate, high potential students, but from very low income backgrounds who don't have the opportunity to go to university. So only 50% of students in Honduras continue their education past high school, and in rural areas that's even lower. So we work primarily in rural areas trying to find these students who really have the potential to go on to university and who want to study and to provide those opportunities. So we currently have 3 students in our university scholarship program. And then we also work with public primary schools to start community-based school libraries, so partnering with teachers and forming local committees and really trying to foster local leadership, through trusting local leaders and seeing how these kinds of spaces of libraries and schools can really transform learning environments. So all focused around education, all very community-based, and trying to sort of also work at all levels, so from primary all the way through to university level.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think it's also really nice to see that you are really focused on the community itself and not just, go there yourself. But that's something that we will pick up later on. But how did it all start? When did you go to Honduras and why? And what did you do there?
It was a little bit random. I went to volunteer for a year with an organisation called Project Trust, who are based in the UK. They're a Scottish organisation, and they place you for a year in different projects all around the world, and you have to commit to a 1-year placement. So they don't do short-term volunteering where you sort of pop in and out. And so I was placed in Honduras. I wanted to learn Spanish, but I didn't know anything about Honduras. I wasn't even particularly drawn to Honduras. It just sort of ended up happening. And I was working there for a year with at-risk youth, which was a very eye-opening experience, both from seeing sort of the just absolutely vast inequalities in educational opportunities that young people have. Honduras has the highest economic inequality in the whole Latin American region, and Latin America is the most unequal region in the world, so it's up there. And just different worlds, streets away from each other.
Yeah.
And seeing that, and also seeing just these incredible teachers and people who had so much passion and so much drive, and they're not studying because of any moral or personal characteristics. It's just not possible. Yeah. And so that was, having a lot of relationships and conversations with people was really the drive to see what we could do and how we could support at a local level.
Right. So that was the moment that you realized you have to do something about it.
I wouldn't say it's the moment. It was, I was there for a year, then I left, then I came back a year later, and that was when actually Educate started. So it wasn't actually during that initial year. That year was really a learning experience. I think I learned just a ton about Honduras and the local politics and all sorts of things that were going on in the country at the time. But it was really a year later that Educate really started forming.
But did you, when you were coming back, did you already formulate the plan, or was it when you came back there a year later that you were like, okay, now is the time? Or how can I imagine that timeline?
Yeah, so I left Honduras sort of feeling like I had done what I could at that point. I was 18, 19. I was really young, and I really enjoyed my time there, learned a ton. But having also seen a lot of foreign NGOs coming in and doing things that were really ineffective, I knew I didn't want to be that person. And so I didn't want to sort of put myself in that position either. And I wasn't in a place to at that time either. So it was really, I came back to the Netherlands, started studying and having conversations here, and then going back to Honduras and having a lot more conversations there. It was really a slow process. It wasn't a moment of like, oh, I met this person and was inspired. And then even the start of Educate was a slow process. As I said, we were two people trying to sort of get something off the ground, and then we had our first scholarship student, and then from there it was step by step, and really over the past year and a half I think it's gone from being like a passion project to like a proper organization where we have like structures and proper things that an organization has.
Like proper teams, like proper team structure. Yeah.
A
nice.
finance manager.
Super great. Nice. And so you talk, of course, you already talked a bit about like the whole education inequality, but why is the focus so much on education? Why did you choose, and also why did you choose the name Educate?
That's a good story. Education was really, both my parents are teachers, and
so you're a bit biased.
A little bit sort of drawn to that area anyway. But in all the conversations that I was having, both with my co-founder Lisa, who's a good friend who also lived in Honduras, we actually reconnected here in the Netherlands, as well as with teachers and just people and friends in Honduras. Everything was just coming back to education, no matter what we were talking about, whether it was health, whether it was like violence, whether it was inequality, all these things. If you want to tackle the root causes and try to create sort of structural or systematic change, it always comes back to education in different ways and in different forms and all sorts of different sort of ways to do that. But education really just seems like a way that you can build something on a strong foundation. And so I think it's also a way that you can promote very locally led change.
Yeah. And the name.
we were trying to sort of think about a name that had the essence of what we wanted to do. And we were sitting at Plek in Amsterdam North. Yeah. Having a beer, me and Lisa, my co-founder. Mm-hmm. And it just sort of, I remember her saying, educate with a lowercase e and a dot at the end. And that just, because it's just education. That's what it's all about. That's what everything comes down to for us. That's what the core of who we are and what we believe in. And so it kind of just encapsulates.
Straight to the point.
Yeah.
Literally also.
And it works in Spanish as well.
Educate, yeah. Nice, super nice. Well, after a short break, we're going to talk a bit more about the country itself. But let's listen to another song first.
Yes, this song is going to give us a bit of an introduction to the next section. It's called Frijolero, and it's a classic about and for the immigrants who cross the border from Central America to the US and who continue to be victims of racism wherever they are.
Yo ya estoy hasta la madre de que me pongan sombrero. Escucha entonces cuando digo, no me llames frijolero. Ya que existe algún respeto y no metamos las narices, no que inflamos la moneda haciendo guerra a otros países. Te pagamos con petróleo o intereses nuestra deuda. Mientras tanto no sabemos que se queda con la feria, a que nos hagan la fama de que somos vendedores de la droga que sembramos. Ustedes son consumidores. Don't call me gringo, you fucking beaner. Stay on your side of the goddamn river. Don't call me gringo, you beaner. No me digas beaner, Mr. Puñetero. Te sacaré un susto por racista y culero. No me llames frijolero, pinche gringo puñetero. Chingao.
Now I wish I had a dime for every single time I've gotten stared down for being in the wrong side of town. In a rich man I'd be if I had that kind of chips. Lately I wanna smack the mouths of these racists. Podrás imaginarte desde afuera ser un mexicano cruzando la frontera, pensando tu familia mientras que pasas, dejando todo lo que tú conoces atrás. Si tuvieras tú que esquivar las balas de unos cuantos gringos rancheros, le seguirás diciendo good for nothing wetback. Si tuvieras tú que empezar de cero, now why don't you look down the way your feet is planted? That US soil that makes you take shit for granted. If not for Santa Ana, just to let you know that where your feet are planted would be Mexico, correcto.
Don't call me gringo, you fucking beaner. Stay on your side of the goddamn river. Don't call me gringo, you beaner. No me digas beaner, Mr. Puñetero. Te sacaré un susto por racista y culero. No me llames frijolero, pinche gringo puñetero. Side of the goddamn river, don't call me gringo, you beaner. No me digas beaner, Mr. Puñetero. Te sacaré un susto por racista y culero. No me llames frijolero, pinche gringo, puñetero.
Let's talk about Honduras. I actually wrote down some facts because I cannot remember them. But Honduras itself lays between Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua in Central America. The language is Spanish, and the main city, I cannot pronounce it. You have to help me out here.
Tegucigalpa.
Tegucigalpa, yeah, that one.
Best capital city name, I think.
Yeah, I mean, no one can pronounce it, but... and then there are like 9.5 million people living there at the moment.
Sounds about right.
But it's also a nation that is facing quite the challenges. Can you talk a bit more about the challenges and how did you experience them yourself when you were there?
Yeah, I mean, Honduras, as many of the sort of developing countries of the world, has faced challenges throughout its history since being colonized by the Spanish to now facing sort of imperialism from the US, being a military dictatorship essentially, and all of those things like seep into the daily life of everybody because they're structural issues, and also things like the poverty rate being close to 70% of the country, having sky high inequality. So you have these gated communities where people are very well off and live in their little bubbles, and then you have the rest of the country trying to get by basically, and it's a very stark reality. And what I find really interesting is the political aspect of it. I mean, Honduras had a US-backed military coup in 2009, and since then haven't had democratic elections, and the US continues to back this government. Mm-hmm. And so there's a huge amount of anger as well in the population about this, because it's just an incredible injustice. And you have human rights activists and environmental activists just being killed for standing up for human rights or for trying to protect indigenous lands. So you're sort of caught in this dilemma where there are all of these issues, and people that are trying to make things better are just being disappeared, which, being killed by the government most often. And it's a very scary reality. You also have a lot of violence from street gangs that were also originate largely from the US, and that now control a lot of communities. So you have a lot of also violence between different groups. And Honduras continues to be one of the countries with the highest homicide rate in the world. And so it's more than just a poor country. There's these huge structural issues that affect daily life, and that I mean, living with friends in Honduras, you see that as a very everyday reality of a farmer who lives next to this factory that's run by one of the richest men in the country, and all this smoke is coming across all their crops. And it's not going by any of the supposed environmental regulations, and he can't do anything because he knows that if he says anything, he might not be there tomorrow, and he's got kids. And so it's very difficult for Hondurans to do much. Like, obviously there's huge activist movements and there's protests and people are incredibly resilient, but it's hard. It's a very hard reality.
Yeah, it's like a climate of fear.
Absolutely.
Being pushed down. Yeah. And also there have been some challenges in the past, right? Like in November last year, has been the hurricane, and as we all know, there has been COVID for quite a long time now. What is the effect on Honduras? And
so, obviously, with COVID, is just a very different thing when you make a living day to day. So a lot of in educates communities, for example. People live from the money that they make at the market that day, or from their crops and things like that. And having lockdown, which in Honduras was also military enforced, super strict, you're left without that money that puts food on the table. Mm-hmm. And there's no government support programs or safety nets or insurance and all of these things. That just doesn't exist for the vast majority of people, certainly in our communities. And so that's been tough, and schools have been closed. They're still closed since March 2020. There's no plan for them to open. Kids in rural areas who don't have internet are just not going to school, and that's just the way it is at the moment, which is terrifying. What's going to happen, especially with young girls who, teenage pregnancy rates are high enough as they are, but things like that we've seen that they're increasing in across Central America as well as other parts of the world. And then, as you mentioned, the hurricanes as well. In November last year, there were 2 record-breaking hurricanes within 2 weeks, which scientists know are, because of climate change. And again, that's affecting the most vulnerable people. And our project coordinator, Walter, in Honduras, lost his home, lost everything that he owned. And again, no government support, nothing. Even very little humanitarian aid. It's one of the Norwegian Refugee Alliance, is that what they're called? I forget. They called it one of the top 10 sort of least recognized disasters of the year, or something along those lines. It's shocking, and it's shocking to see how little support there is for these kinds of things, and people just expected to sort of go on and figure it out, and that there is enormous resilience, and you do see communities coming together and trying to support one another, but people just shouldn't have to be that resilient all the time. Mm-hmm. So at Educate, we put together our food package program, and we had our book writing competition to keep kids sort of engaged, even though schools are closed and these things, and doing what we can. But it's been a very difficult year, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. But it's also beautiful to keep up the spirit as much as possible with those competitions, for example. Yeah. And as I know, because I'm a part of the team, it resulted in a beautiful book. Yeah. So that's quite a positive and nice outcome.
No, that was lovely. We had kids all across the country writing stories about their communities and their grandparents, or the lake in their village and how they keep it clean and all these things. And 5 of them were, for those who don't know, obviously but they were published in this children's book. So that was a really, definitely a nice project to be able to do during these times.
Yeah. Well, after our break, we're going to talk a bit more about the philosophy itself. Music. Can you talk about it?
Our next song is Somos Sur by Ana Tijoux. She's a Chilean French singer and musician. The song is about the pride and solidarity amongst people living under forms of oppression all across the world.
Tú nos dices que debemos sentarnos, pero las ideas solo pueden levantarnos, caminar, recorrer, no rendirse ni retroceder, ver, aprender como esponja, absorber. Nadie sobre todos, faltan todos, suman todos para todos, todo para nosotros. Soñamos en grande que se caiga el imperio, lo gritamos algo, no queda más remedio. Esto no es utopía, es alegre rebeldía del baile de los que sobran de la danza tuya mía. Levantarnos para decir ya basta. Ni África ni América Latina se suba. Con barro, con casco, con lápiz a patear el fiasco. Provocar un social terremoto en este charco. Todos los Concepción, Matías, Catrileo o Almapu. 1000 veces venceremos, del cielo al suelo y del suelo al cielo vamos. Caballito blanco, vuelve pa' tu pueblo, no te tenemos miedo, tenemos vida y fuego. Fuego en nuestras manos, fuego en nuestros ojos, tenemos tanta vida y esta fuerza color rojo. La niña María no quiere tu castigo, se va a liberar con el suelo palestino. Somos africanos, latinoamericanos, somos este sur y juntamos nuestras manos. Todos los callados, todos los sometidos, todos los invisibles, todos los callados, todos los sometidos, todos los invisibles,
So what I found striking when I applied for Educate and for the events team position, I of course checked out the website before because otherwise it would be quite unprofessional. And then I was also looking at at the projects and at your story basically. And what I found really interesting and cool is that it's very focused on the community itself. So it's not like, hey, we go there and we change the world. It was more about how can we help them to help themselves. And I think that's one of the most important pillars in Educate's philosophy. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you talk about how did you come up with this philosophy? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it's a growing sort of movement, I think, now in the development sector, with sort of the shift the power movement is sort of the hashtag.
Yeah.
But it's basically about, I think, that the nonprofit sector is built on a history of colonialism, of top-down relations. We help them, this sort of separation, and very patronizing attitude often of looking down on developing countries, which I think is just a completely flawed way of partnering, or I mean, it's not partnering. That's the whole thing. So what I saw a lot in Honduras is that you have exactly this. So you have these foreign organizations or foreign volunteers or missionaries from the US coming in and thinking that they know best, that they're sort of this like foreign expert and that they know what Honduran communities need. And so they go in and they say, oh, we're going to do this project, and they spend all this money and write their reports and take nice pictures. And often, not always, but very often, these projects are ineffective. They don't have long-term impact because they haven't had the local input. And very often they don't tackle genuine local needs because the project is based on a foreigner's perspective rather than on a local's perspective who really understands the community. Yeah. So for example, I mean, one sort of massive project that was quite close to where I used to live was this huge church that they'd built in, and I think there's a whole nother conversation to have around like religion and the influence of religion on like sort of nonprofits or charity work. But basically they built this church in a community that already had a church. And so you had this huge building that they invested close to $1 million in that was empty. It was never used. And there is so much need, and to invest that much money in a project that, one, isn't needed, and two, is then just not used at all, is just terrible. I think it's ineffective, but it's also just disrespectful to the community. So that amongst that, and then you also have like foreign volunteers coming in for a week and thinking that they're gonna like take some nice selfies with children and save the world. As sort of like this white savior complex. And obviously I'm like a white woman myself, and so there's a lot of like being self-critical and like thinking about how do my actions like reinforce power relationships often, which they do, and it's really hard to not, because there's just so much tied to like whiteness in the development sector. And it's a really important conversation to have, and that's why Educate's sort of philosophy is built on this like anti-service mentality, is that we don't go in thinking that we have the answers. It's all about like building relationships and listening and really facilitating local leaders who know what their communities need. People like teachers. Teachers are amazing. Like they know every student in their classroom. They have grown up in these communities. They know intimately what can support the educational system in that particular area. And so we really try and facilitate that kind of leadership by people like that who can lead projects in a way that's effective, that's responsible, and that's respectful also of the local knowledge that exists.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think also when I before I started for Educate, I was actually, by the way, and I felt a bit how do you say that, like caught, because I also went to Argentina when I was after school, when I was finished for like a couple of months, and then later during my work at Educate, actually I heard about this whole white savior complex, and I was like, oh, I think I'm also I think I have to think about myself here.
Yeah.
Or like I have to reflect on my own behavior.
Unfortunately, it's something that's so you get praised often as a white person for going to a developing country and helping, and that people still say, oh, it's such a wonderful project. I'm like, no, yeah, Educate is fantastic, but it's not fantastic because of like me and you sitting here. Like we in Amsterdam really try and take the sort of behind the scenes stuff and facilitate the people in Honduras who know their communities. But there's this whole idea still today, which is very, very racist, basically. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to tackle that, and also trying to sort of be an example of how this can actually be done differently, because I think often there's not a lot of trust in allowing like a teacher in a primary school up on a mountain in Honduras to lead a project and being like, we'll fund this, you lead it, we trust you. For some reason that doesn't happen very much, and so we're also trying to sort of be a bit of a model, I guess, that this works, and our projects are doing really well, and we can show that.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And talk a bit about the short-term and long-term goals or aspirations for Educate, because you talk about like we want to be community focused, but what's your end goal?
Yeah, good question. At the moment we're working on this youth center project. Mm-hmm. So we've got our scholarship program at the moment, and we've got these library projects. In the sort of more short term, we're trying to find ways that we can bring those two together. Mm-hmm. So things like having the scholars giving workshops to younger students in their communities through these library spaces and things like that. And in the slightly longer term, we're looking to really partner with local government to open libraries at the municipal level and have those also be youth centers where we can bring scholarship students, but also other students from communities together for mentorship and trainings and events and other kinds of programs that can sort of support the educational development of young people in these areas. Yeah.
We will talk a bit more about the scholarships, and we will also talk a bit more about the youth center, but first let's have a little break.
Yes, we've got another song. This one is Mafiosa, which is a salsa song by Argentinian singer-songwriter Nati Peluso.
No cualquiera se me acerca, yo lo sé. Dicen que hay que tener agallas pa' comerme, que hay que tener el cuerpo para aguantarme. ¿Cómo es que usted sabe tanto de mí? Dale, jura que jura. Si pongo mano en el fuego por ti, me la quemo segura. Se rumorea que hay dos clases de pendejo: el que habla por la espalda y el que se mira al espejo. Y yo le pregunto al cielo si algún día alguno se atreverá. Si tanto miedo me tienen, ahora tenerme de verdad. Voy a ser mafiosa, la amaré
mafiosa.
Scholarships. So in the beginning, you already said that one of the first projects was a scholarship and a scholarship student that you were able to support. Tell us a bit about her.
Yeah, so that was the very first thing that Educate did in Honduras, was take on our first scholarship student. And her name is Stephanie. And I actually met Stephanie during that first year that I was living in Honduras. Ended up actually living with her family for quite some time. Her parents are farmers. They have a small farm with some cows and like a lot of fruit trees and things near El Progreso in Honduras on the sort of north coast area. And she went to high school and was one of the top students in her grade, graduated in the top 3 of her year group. Incredibly driven young woman, and during her holidays was finding ways to volunteer on medical brigades that were coming from the US because she was learning English, and so then she could help with translating. Just very passionate, active girl, even back when she was still in high school. And so that's when I first met her, and she really wanted to go to university. But obviously in Honduras, it's not easy, and it's very expensive. Even any university degree. She was really passionate about medicine, which is amongst obviously the more expensive options out there. But she was just such a passionate person and so driven, and doing these things like volunteering on medical brigades to get experience and learn more. And so she was, in a way, sort of one of the reasons that Educate also that we wanted to get it off the ground. She was one of the first sort of, we had her in mind as we started looking into how to actually start up an organization. And we're really, really happy to be able to support her with the first Educate University Scholarship. And she's just started her 5th year now.
Right.
So starting now her 5th year. And is just doing an incredible job. And obviously with COVID, it's been a bit difficult studying from home, but she has been able to go into hospitals and do sort of practical work and things, and just an incredible young woman to be able to support. And I think she's a real role model also for other young women and girls in her community, studying in a field like medicine in Honduras as a young woman from a low-income background, having that space at university and being able to, be that person who can also be a role model for others. She's a really, really incredible young woman. So she was our very first student.
And how many students do you have in total now? Like how many scholarships do we?
We've got 3 right now. So It's still a small program. Then the second one was Tanya, also a young woman who's studying industrial engineering, another intense field, and again just a incredibly passionate young woman also. And the third one was then Javier, who's studying computer science. Right. So three at the moment, hoping to take on another student. We've got applications will probably open quite soon for that in Honduras for next January. Mm-hmm. And yeah, with some other projects that we've got going on, like the Youth Center, which we'll talk about in a bit, I think, hoping to really expand that program because it has just, I think the power of sending young people to university is just transformative, that changes their life fundamentally. Yeah. And not only for them, but for their families, for their communities, having young people who children can see from their village that go to university, knowing that that's an option, is also changes something in people's minds as well, I think.
Definitely, yeah. And how does the application, can you talk a bit about the application process itself? Mm-hmm. So how is a decision made that a student gets a fund, like a scholarship or funding?
Yeah, so we work very closely with public high schools on that. So have a lot of relationships with teachers who can sort of help find students who might be interested and who might be a good fit for the program. Mm-hmm. We also really look for students who want to also give back to their communities, that don't just want to study and then go to the US or things like that. So that's part of it. Obviously, academics is a small part of it as well, because going to university is not easy. But much more important is the sort of passion and drive and the motivation of the student to want to go to uni and why, and wanting to sort of also be involved in Educate and be part of that community and also give back in other ways. So there's a written application, there's interviews, we visit the families and try and sort of really build a relationship and get to know the students, also together with the teachers. We have a sort of rubric of different categories that we look for in that process.
Right. Yeah, so you already talked about the youth center and make it bigger, make it more easy accessible for more people. We will talk about that as in our last bit. But before we continue with our last bit, let's listen to one more song.
Yes, this song is Clandestino by Manu Chao. He's a French singer of Spanish origin, and the lyrics of the song deal with the issue of immigration.
Solo voy con mi pena, sola va mi condena. Correré mi destino para burlar la ley, perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino por no llevar papel. Pa' una ciudad del norte yo me fui a trabajar. Mi vida la dejé entre Ceuta y Gibraltar. Soy una raya en el mar, fantasma en la ciudad. Mi vida va prohibida, dice la autoridad. Solo voy con mi pena, sola va mi condena. Correré mi destino por no llevar papel, perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino, yo soy el quebra ley. Mano negra clandestina, peruano clandestino, africano clandestino, marihuana ilegal. Solo voy con mi pena, sola va mi condena. Correré mi destino para burlar la ley, perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino por no llevar papel. Argelino clandestino, nigeriano clandestino, boliviano clandestino.
So as our last section, I would say, we already talked a bit about it, but what's going on at the moment at Educate?
We've got a lot going on at the moment. Primarily is this youth center project that's come up throughout our conversation. So we're partnering with the local government in Honduras, in the municipality where our work is based, which is called Trinidad. And there's this old building that's been sort of completely out of use. The roof has fallen in. Unusable at the moment, and we're looking to refurbish that building into this youth center, and to also have it be a municipal library that's open to the whole community. So we want to be able to bring our students together. We're organizing a mentorship program, tutoring sessions, workshops on the weekends and after school to really bring young people together and provide these educational opportunities, as well as the scholarships and expanding that. So we've been accepted into this Global Giving Accelerator program, which launched this Monday and is open until the end of the month. And we have to raise $5,000, about 4,500 euros by the end of this month. So it's a huge challenge for a grassroots NGO. But we're getting there. We hit our first 1,000 this morning. If you're interested in donating, you can go to our website, www.educate-ngo.com, and there's a big green bar where it says donate to our global giving campaign. So that was much appreciated. But we also have this run, which maybe you can talk about, Sarah, as you're on the organizing team.
Yes, as I said in the beginning, I'm part of the events team, and we are organizing this, it's called Westerpark Run for a Cause. So it's hosted in Amsterdam. It's finally a live event, because during Corona we were only able to host online events. So we're really excited to meet again in person and meet new faces and also meet each other again, because a lot of the members didn't meet before. It was always online. We host this Westerpark Run for a Cause. Also, you can just type it in either in Eventbrite, Meetup, or in Facebook. There's a lot of information, and you can get your donation-based ticket. It's 3 options: silver, bronze, and gold. And you get a T-shirt, for example, if you buy a certain ticket, and definitely a wristband. It will happen on the 25th of September at 11 o'clock. So if you're keen on a short run, it's only 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers, or even a fun run. So if you're keen on wearing your craziest costume, you can just come by, and at the same time have fun, and at the same time as well, do something.
Support a good cause. Yeah.
Support a good cause, indeed. So that's happening in 10 days almost, 9 days.
Yep, September 25th.
Yeah, 25th, exactly. So that's the run.
Yeah, also on our website.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, and that will also all go towards this global giving campaign. So
very excited.
Another way to be part of it.
Yeah, so if you want to meet us in person, come to the event. And that was it from us. Thank you for listening or watching or, whatever you did.
And thanks for OT301 for having us.
Again,
and
shout out.
We'll finish off on one last song, I think. This is by Calle 13, Latinoamérica.
Esta mañana de su radio Intidaiti. Allí ya chukaliyachu walayachu mereya kasekichis. Kay qosqollaqta pika yatata hawallaqta kunapi uyarimarnikuna wayqikuna panaykuna. Kunaka allin taki wayrakuna chaymuqa kay Puerto Rico nación manta pacha. Paykuna sutikmi Calle 13. Y las patas vemos taquita pomanchis. Chaytaki sutikmi Latinoamérica. Uyarikusunchis.
Cancunapa. Soy lo que dejaron, soy toda la sobra de lo que se robaron. Un pueblo escondido en la cima, mi piel es de cuero, por eso aguanta cualquier clima. Soy una fábrica de humo, mano de obra campesina para tu consumo. Frente de frío en el medio del verano, el amor en los tiempos del cólera, mi hermano. El sol que nace y el día que muere, con los mejores atardeceres. Soy el desarrollo en carne viva, un discurso político sin saliva. Las caras más bonitas que he conocido, soy la fotografía de un desaparecido. La sangre dentro de tus venas, soy un pedazo de tierra que vale la pena una canasta con frijoles. Soy Maradona contra Inglaterra, anotándote 2 goles. Soy lo que sostiene mi bandera, la espina dorsal del planeta en mis cordilleras. Soy lo que me enseñó mi padre, el que no quiere a su patria, no quiere a su madre. Soy América Latina, un pueblo sin pierna pero que camina. Oye,
tú no puedes comprar el viento, tú no puedes comprar al sol, tú no puedes comprar la lluvia, tú no puedes comprar el calor, tú no puedes comprar las nubes, tú no puedes comprar los colores, tú no puedes comprar mi alegría, tú no puedes comprar mis dolores, tú no puedes comprar el viento, tú no puedes comprar al sol, tú no puedes comprar la lluvia, tú no puedes comprar el calor, tú no puedes comprar las nubes, tú no puedes comprar los colores, tú no puedes comprar mi alegría, tú no puedes comprar mis dolores.
tengo los lagos, tengo los ríos, tengo mis dientes pa' cuando me sonrío, la nieve que maquilla mis montañas, tengo el sol que me seca y la lluvia que me baña, un desierto embriagado con peyote, un trago de pulque para cantar con los coyotes, todo lo que necesito. Tengo a mis pulmones respirando azul clarito, la altura que sofoca. Soy las muelas de mi boca, mascando coca, el otoño con sus hojas desmayadas, los versos escritos bajo la noche estrellada, una viña repleta de uva, un cañaveral bajo el sol en Cuba. Soy el mar Caribe que vigila de las casitas haciendo rituales de agua bendita, el viento que peina mi cabello. Soy todos los santos que cuelgan de mi cuello. El jugo de mi lucha no es artificial porque el abono de mi tierra es natural.
Tú